I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Good evening, folks. How's everyone doing tonight? I hope everyone is out there staying safe and healthy, okay? I want to thank you for turning into Media Talks tonight. Media Talks was developed by the BRIC Media Education Team to basically help inform and educate the public on different media matters. We've touched upon things from copyright infringement to distribution, even hosting, and dibble-dabbled here and there with, freelancing and even screenwriting. Now, tonight's edition is specifically focusing on podcasting and all the fundamentals that you would need to pitch a really good podcast. And tonight I have with me some representatives from At Will Media, which is a full-fledged media organization that also specializes in audio production. So without further ado, I want you guys to introduce yourselves and just give us a little, background about yourselves. So ladies first, Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina Friel. I am a writer, development producer over at Will Media. I have a background in TV production, and I started writing podcasts about 2 years ago with Connor Wright, who's also here.
Okay, so Connor, can you get a little background about yourself?
Hi, yeah. A lot of what Christina just said. We're both on the development team here. We're both the writing team here. And yeah, we started working at Will Media earlier this year, and we've been bringing in projects and finding new podcasts to produce. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So who else do we have with us today? Okay, we're having a little... Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're having a little technical difficulties.
This is the beauty, the beauty of doing this remotely, right? We're all trying to do our best every day. But my name's Will Malnati. I started at Will Media about 4 years ago, and before that, I was actually I always knew I wanted to produce, but I went down a different path and worked in hospitality for about 8 or 10 years. And so being able to do this for the past 4 years has been really amazing, and bringing on people like Connor and Christina and the rest of our team has been just a really amazing experience, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. So
all right, well, congratulations.
Thank you for having us. This is awesome.
Oh, no, not a problem.
We're excited.
I'm definitely happy to have you aboard, and congratulations to you, Will, on starting such an amazing phenomenon on that accord. And
Thank you.
So with that being said, like, there are different parts when it comes to pitching. You have your pre-pitch, your pitching, and then the post-pitch. So what are some of the fundamentals that one must have when you're in the pre-pitching stage?
Yeah. Well, listen, I think at this point, there's a lot of different types of podcasts. And I think, it's interesting. When I was first starting the business, I remember there was kind of only like two different formats of podcasts. One was, your standard kind of interview talk show, and one was news shows. That was pretty much all we saw. And then a big project that I'm sure people have heard of called Serial came along. And if you haven't listened to Serial, you should. But it was really game changing for the industry, and it really allowed.
Okay, so
I know that it was Will.
yeah, Will's a little frozen there. Hey, isn't technology grand, folks?
I know you.
Larry's back.
What I was saying was just, Serial was really a game changer and a pioneer in the space, and it changed the way that people kind of thought about podcasts as an industry. And so we were able to, from there, I was able to start looking at like what else can be done here. And so when we talk, it's not just, an interview show anymore. It's not just a news show anymore. We have investigative journalists, and we have, documentaries happening. We have scripted podcasts, which is something that we've really tried to lean into a lot in the past couple of years, which, are essentially TV shows for your ears. There's just a lot more when you're thinking about pitching. It's the first thing you got to do is just kind of think about like, what's the best format for, what I want to communicate. And sometimes it can be a few different things, and you got to kind of decide which is your favorite and which you feel like tells the story the best. So one of the things that we kind of look at, first is just kind of just that. Does this work as a talk show with two people, who are coming on, and it's a weekly show where you're hearing them consistently week to week? Is it work as a limited series where there's only 8 episodes or even 6 episodes or 10, and there's there's kind of a beginning, middle, and end to the story that you're trying to tell in a short period of time? Is it reporter based and investigative, where you're finding sources and you're really trying to report on something and get to the bottom of something, or really help to validate something or help to uncover something. So I think that's the first thing. First step is just, what kind of format do you think that what you want to convey or what you want to communicate will kind of work best. And the second thing is this a project that you're passionate about? I think oftentimes we hear pitches from people, and at the end of the pitch they say, okay, so what do you think? And I find myself kind of sitting there like, it doesn't really feel like you are that engaged in this for some reason. It doesn't really, it feels like you're kind of you're wanting to tell this story, but you're not needing to tell it, if that makes sense.
No, definitely, yes.
And I think that shines through. When you're first kind of just developing this idea, it's like, is this something that you really want to dig into? If it's a weekly podcast, you want to talk about it every week.
Okay.
If it's a limited series, which often takes a lot more production because you only have a short period of time to do something, is it something that you want to spend a bunch of your time really diving into and researching? And so that passion really shines through. And just speaking of audio as as a medium, everyone always says this, but it's true. Audio is different than TV, and it's different than film. It's literally, you're listening to it with your brain. It's close to your brain. And so it's very intimate, and it's something that you can tell when someone who's speaking to you in your ears is really passionate about something, whether they really believe what they're saying. And that's the difference, I think. Sometimes there's no visuals to distract. You're just listening to someone in your ears. The third thing is just, something that we think about when we're talking about a pitch and preparing for a pitch is this idea fully developed? And that can mean a lot of different things, but I think, a few things that we talk about is who is the intended audience for this.
Okay.
And it's really important to be able to nail that down. It's important to be able to communicate who you want to communicate to, because if you can't, then, first of all, what are you doing? But second of all, you may not have really fully defined what this project is. And so that's a big part for us, is this, and another part to that is the audience big enough, or is this just a very niche project, is for a very niche audience, a small audience, and both are good, they're just two different types of projects. One is for everyone, and one is for a small amount of people. And both of those happen. And I think at this point, there's 400 or 500,000 active podcasts on the Apple Podcast app. That's a lot of podcasts. So people are talking to a lot of different audiences. But back to the development, what are the pieces that you need for this pitch? Who's involved in it from both a creative perspective? Who are you going to be talking to? Who are your guests, if you have guests? Who are your sources, if this is, if you're reporting on something? Who are your actors, if this is a scripted podcast? All those things you got to really be thinking about beforehand. We talk about this a lot. People jump into this space and jump into podcasting. They're excited to be in it, but they haven't really fully thought through what the idea is and planned ahead. So then they'll just kind of pick up a mic and start talking into it, and then they'll put it up, and because it's easy to do that, which is amazing. But also, if it's not fully really thought out in terms of the different parts that are going to make this thing great, it can often kind of fall apart. So I think the other thing we always talk about is if this is a series that's going to go on for a long time, and probably some of the best podcasts out right now, they're happening every week. You look at a podcast like The Daily for the New York Times, that's happening daily. It's a grind. And so if you want to do a show like that and you can't think about what the 100th episode is going to be, or even what the 20th episode is going to be, you might want to rethink it. And you might want to actually sit down and say, like, how do I map beyond, the 6th or 10th episode? How do I make sure that this thing can go the distance? So other things are rights. If there's rights involved in things, I mean, that's like a whole other step. Are you allowed to tell this story? Do you need to talk to, an attorney or something? And that's a whole can of worms that we're still learning. Every day we learn something new about rights and all that. But listen, I think the goal outcome is really an important thing to think about too. What do you want from this? What do you want from this podcast? And if it's to get rich, it's probably not the right industry for you, because in podcasts, at least right now, you see some big headlines every once in a while, but really it's still not a fully mature industry yet. And so when people say to me, I want to start a podcast because I want to make a lot of money, I'm like, well, there's other ways maybe to try to do that. In terms of podcasts, we're still early. It's still a pretty nascent industry. And so we want to get with people and say, why are you doing this? Is this a side hustle, which is a great side hustle?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a passion project? Is it something that you just want to do for fun? And I would say a majority of podcasts are just for fun. Are you a business and you're trying to, create some kind of marketing or some noise around your business? That's another version of podcasts, and we do a lot of those. It's important to know why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. Is it to create awareness, about something? And once you kind of get with that and understand why you're doing it, I think it helps you shape the rest of it. But yeah, those are mostly the things we kind of think about when we're talking about pre-pitch. I would say the last thing is what makes your podcast unique, because you gotta stand out, and the goal in 500,000 podcasts right now that exist is to really be able to rise to the top and to have a lot of people listen to your show, at least for us as a business. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about just doing it as a passion project, doing it for fun, no worries, all good. But when it's a business, it's different, and we want to make sure that we really have those things sorted, and we want to make sure that what we're doing is unique and in some way special or different from what the next guy's doing.
So let me ask you this: would you recommend possibly maybe running this idea by a couple of peers or just individuals that you might be thinking might be your niche audience, just to see if oh yeah, that's something I would want to listen to, that's something I might tune into as maybe just a little sense of research?
I think that's a great start. I think anytime you can get feedback from your peers of hey, I have this idea. Does this sound crazy to you? Is this something that you would listen to? Is this something you would enjoy or learn from? I think those are all super important questions to be asking, not only your peers, but maybe a teacher or a professor, or someone that you trust, or it's someone in your family. I think that getting that type of feedback before going in front of anyone else to really have a formal pitch is important. That's the first step. If you can't get past that step in convincing someone that your idea has some validity to it and has some excitement around it, then the next step is going to be more challenging.
Okay, so make sure you have the idea set and ready to go. Make sure it's something that you're passionate about. Maybe put some feedback to certain folks, and then just make sure you have that checklist all set and ready to go. Okay, got it.
I think so, and all of that is just about making sure that you feel confident about this idea before you go to the outside world with it, or at least go to a pitch office, which can be very scary.
Oh yes, extremely intimidating. Yes. Okay. So let's say you have one has checked all the boxes for that, and they built up their confidence and they're really passionate about their podcast and they're ready to go, and they are even coming with well, first of all, would you recommend even maybe having a few episodes in the can to have something to show or to send off first?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one piece of advice that I always give first-time podcasters or people who are considering having a podcast is you can't do anything until you kind of press the record button and try it out.
Okay. All right.
And a lot of people have great ideas, and they say, I want to do a podcast and I want it to sound like this, and I want to interview this person and XYZ. But if they never hit the record button, then how do you start? And I think that, so as much as you want to plan, you don't want to over plan to the point of never actually, hitting record. And I think it's important to if you're the one who's actually going to be on this podcast and speaking on it, then it's good to make practice of hearing your voice and getting into a rhythm that you feel comfortable with. And of course, the first few episodes that you record, they're going to suck. That's the reality.
Okay.
Most people's first recordings, they actually never air them because they just, those aren't their best episodes. But by the fourth episode or fifth, now we're starting to get into a groove. Now we're starting to understand kind of how we're going to communicate and get into the flow a little bit.
Okay. So now they've checked every list, for the pre-pitching. All the boxes have been checked. They're all set. Confidence is ready to go. They're even coming in with like 1 or 2 episodes, to pitch with. Connor, now I'm in front of, someone or panel of folks and I'm ready to pitch. What's the next step?
Sure. I mean, yeah, we can talk about a few things to consider when you're crafting the pitch. And Christina can help me with some of this too. But one of the first things is figuring out who you're pitching to. So if this is a production company that you're trying to partner with before you take it out to the marketplace, or are you going into a platform like an Audible or a Spotify or somebody that's going to buy the podcast, try to figure out who their target demographic is and try to figure out who you would be pitching to really start to sort of craft the pitch to that sort of audience or to that person. So if it's somebody like an Audible who is very much has this readership base, people that are really into books, it's like try to figure out sort of a kind of sophisticated way of explaining your idea so that it could appeal to that sort of audience. Yeah.
Right, and that's not saying to change your idea at all. It's more cherry picking the things about that idea that would appeal to whatever platform that you're pitching to, like Connor's saying.
So in other words, if you were pitching to Audible, it might be, best to have a scripted series perhaps, or like a storytelling podcast perhaps?
Yeah, well, number one, you can look at sort of what Audible is already doing with their podcasts, and a lot of them are these, for instance, they do a lot of kind of one contained story that is told in chapters like a book. And then they release them as if they are books, but they're fully voice acted, they're fully scripted podcasts. So that's one way of just even delivering that idea, is figuring out a way in which they would fit that format, as opposed to maybe a different platform where you would want to have, 100 episodes that are all different things and are maybe only 10 minutes, but that might sit better for a different platform. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it makes perfect sense.
So yeah, so it's about just maybe doing a little bit of research beforehand.
Okay. And then what should one go in, besides the recorded episodes that you might have, what should someone go in the pitch with as well?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, number one is, try to figure out a deck. And so a deck is usually a visual sort of PowerPoint version of your idea. And so, we essentially a presentation. So we'll show a deck in a little bit, but we can talk about kind of how to craft that early on.
Okay.
Number one, it's like how do you craft this idea in a really precise and interesting way? Number one, what's going to make this idea stand out from the rest? There's a ton of true crime podcasts out there, but what are you going to do with this idea that's going to stick out? And also, what is relevant about the idea? What is something that kind of appeals to what's going on in today, or what's something that hasn't really been covered in podcasting before? And how is this going to tackle that concept? So you're also going to want to figure out the full scope of it as well. Christina can talk about that.
Right. Exactly. I was going to say another thing to think about is thinking about the full scope of your project and story. I think Will touched on this a little bit, but going in there, knowing where your story is going to go and what the 100th episode is going to look like. You don't have to have every single detail plotted out, but the people that you're pitching to want to see that you have an idea of the end of the story, or see that you're confident in how the story is going to play out and the different arcs that your character is going to have.
Okay, okay. Is there any documents that one should bring with them?
Yeah. I mean, we can show one of our decks that we put together. I think you guys have it if you want to throw it up there.
I think. Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yeah.
I think one thing to know is, look, we're talking about audio. So when you think about audio, you're not necessarily thinking about having something visual to accompany that, But I think for us, what we've learned is the more that we can kind of set the tone for what the podcast is visually, up front, I think it helps that whoever you're pitching to really get an understanding of the tone and the vibe, if you will, of what this project is. And I think that it really helps in the beginning to get aligned with, hey, you're going to see some photos and some images right now and some text that's going to help really bring you into the world that we're thinking about creating. So This deck right here is a project that, we read an article about this gentleman who had been an undercover ATF agent, and his story is fascinating, and it reads like it's a movie, because he, almost died 100 different times in 100 different ways, and and he lived to tell the tale, So when we find a story like that that's so interesting and you can't believe it's real, we kind of at that point contacted this man who we did not know, and we just said, hey, we're a production company, we're so interested in your story, it's fascinating, would you do you know what a podcast is really how we have to enter into some of these conversations sometime. And luckily he did, and we got to know him a bit, and luckily he trusted us with his story and said, I want you guys to really take this thing that is on paper and in my head and bring it to life. And so again, back to the deck, you'll see some of him, and you'll see just kind of these old photos that really represent what this story is, and that can often help in the early stages of a pitch.
Okay. So how about for us and the folks at home, break down this deck a little further?
Sure. Yeah. So we approached this deck. First, we had to figure out some sort of visual style of it that kind of made sure we were conveying the tone of it. So the number one thing, you just want to make it look appealing, because just first impressions, just with a deck, will probably go a long way in just getting them hooked and believing in your idea first off. So this was based on Derek Kozlowski. You start with a title slide. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to lead into the idea. And the best way to do that, and this is how we do it, is talk about what inspired the idea. Is it based on a true story? Is it based on something that happened in your life? Is it based on some pre-existing piece of IP? And why is it relevant? So the second slide shows sort of just a blurb about Darren Kozlowski, how he went into all of these motorcycle gangs. He took a different identity. He brought these people to justice 3 different times across the country, and he did it all while raising a family. So already we're hooked. We know it's a real story, and it's a very concise kind of grabber for the beginning. So then you can go to the next slide. Then we're going to talk about the podcast. So what I like to think about it when you're kind of doing a deck or when you're doing a pitch is to start big, get very specific in the middle, and then kind of widen the scope at the end. So almost like an hourglass, you start with just, for instance, the podcast. What is this whole podcast going to be about in very explicit terms? And I think it says in there, this is a multi-season crime show it's each season is going to tackle a different gang. And then the interesting part is that it is both going to be told through interviews with the real Darren Kozlowski, and then it's also going to be told in reenactments by an actor. So again, like we were saying before, like how do we set this apart from other things out there? You know, there's a ton of true crime. The interesting thing with this is we're going to weave in scripted scenes that are, you know, written by real TV writer, you know, and so it's going to feel like a TV show.
Okay.
Okay, so then you can go to the next slide. So now we can start more specifically. We can go into each episode. You know, the first episode is going to talk about Darren getting to LA. He's going to go into the Vagos, which is this gang. And then it's going to end on a cliffhanger. And then you can kind of go through the next couple quickly, but we go through each episode telling you exactly what's going to be covered in each episode and kind of how each episode is going to end on a cliffhanger that's going to want to keep you coming back to the next one. And then so once we get all the kind of, you know, nitty gritty stuff out of the way, we get to the final slide. Yeah, again, these are all the episodes if you really want to go into it. And then finally, you know, we widen the scope again and talk about the future of the show. You know, each season is going to be about a different gang. What's season 2 going to be about? It's going to be about him going over to the East Coast and going into a whole different gang. Third season is going to be him going back to LA to bring down another gang. So what it makes what it makes the person who you're pitching to excited is that this has a life beyond just one season. It's got kind of like endless episodes that can be squeezed out of this. And that will get them excited and also trust that you know this story and know where it's going.
Okay, I'm actually excited myself just to see this develop.
It's working.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, you sold me, and I'm
Wait,
just.
so you're saying you'll buy it?
I'll say I'll listen. I didn't say I'll buy. So with that being said, some folks, majority of folks who want to pitch podcasting or just do podcasting in general, typically want to have themselves on there. Like you said, well, what if you just want to produce? What if you have no interest of actually being recorded on audio, but you really want to produce? Would your pitching mechanisms still be the same, or are you pitching from a different angle now?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I think that it's important that first of all, to know that it shouldn't be you on the microphone is a good decision, you know, to make. And when you can say, all right, it's not me, now it's all right, who should it be? Who makes sense to be the person that's really on the microphone? Whether it's just, you know, I'm not the host type, but I want to find someone who is a great host, someone who is, you know, personable, knowledgeable, entertaining, funny, you know, educated, you know, anything like that. Those are different, you know, characteristics of hosts that you might want to, you know, go out and look for. And you might want to, you know, go to your friends and say, do you have anyone that matches this description? Because I'm looking for someone that could be a great host for this, you know, this show. And the other thing is, you know, if it's like what, you know, Connor and Christina just talked through, which is this kind of scripted with actors, like, and that type of project, then it's, do I have friends that can act? You know, do I have friends that whose voices are pleasing, or whose voices are memorable? You know, it's interesting because when you think about a film or a TV show, you know, oftentimes you're seeing actors who have distinct features. For example, you know, I always remember there's an actor in Braveheart who had a big, you know, scar over his face, and he's got this brooding kind of presence, right? And he fits perfectly for this show. Well, in a podcast, you don't have the luxury of already showing, you know, and showing what that person is like and what they've maybe been through. So all you have to rely on is a voice, you know, and so how can you, you know, we spend hours and hours and hours listening to different people's voices and trying to think about who would make sense for for what type of person and what type of role. And, because that's all you have to go off of.
Okay, so is that something that you can possibly rely on the network or the company that you might be pitching to supply, or is that something that you need to mention in your pitch that you are requiring?
Yeah, I think it could go both ways. I think depending on who you're pitching to, I think it's, hey, I'm thinking that we really need this type of host, or really need this type of personality, or really need this type of actor. And on the other hand, you may have already found a piece of the puzzle. Maybe not, you haven't filled in the whole thing, but you have a piece. Hey, I have, this really great personality, or this person who's very knowledgeable in sports. This is a sports show. This guy knows everything about sports. And we've paired him with this woman who is really funny, and their dynamic is really interesting for these reasons. I think as long as someone you're pitching to understands what your vision is for it, you don't always need all the parts already figured out, but at least you know what you want and what you're looking for, and perhaps there's a way to collaborate on that.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Is there a way that one could prepare themselves for questions that might come their way? I mean, sometimes you just never know when you get in there, but are there some
Right.
basic questions that you think, one, that you can, basically prepare for? Like, okay, you can guarantee they're going to ask this, they're going to want to know about this, or they're going to, possibly inquire about this. I mean,
What do you guys got?
I'm about to say anyone you could take that.
Yeah, Christina, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. For me and Connor, we like to kind of give a dry pitch to some people and see if they have any questions right off the bat, and sort of recraft our pitch from there. Also, going through it, we have a checklist in our brains of all the stuff that we just talked through. Did we cover the longevity of the story arc? Did we cover all the characters and what we want all the episodes to look like? So it's really just kind of backtracking and seeing if you missed anything, and constructing questions from there.
Okay, what about now? I know.
think-
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I think one question we get a lot is, how much is it going to cost?
That's where I was going. Finances. Okay, that's the way I was waiting for. How financing on this? Should one come in with their own budget for this, or the breakdown of this? Like, there's definitely the aspect of money.
Yeah, look, I think some shows can be made on a shoestring, and that's the beauty of podcasts. We talk about independent films and how, even an independent film needs maybe $5,000 or $10,000 to get something made. When we're talking about podcasts, you might be able to do it for less, if you're smart about it. And so it's part of that kind of thinking through what the pitch is, and that development phase is, what is the kind of most frugal way to do this? What is the way to do this for little to nothing? And then from there, what would be a way to do this if I had a few $1,000s? And then what would be a way to do this if I had $50,000? And so I think there's different versions of this thing that it's wise to be thinking about. When you're pitching something, a lot of times you're pitching so that the person who maybe is interested in partnering with you will give you some money. The other reason why you pitch is for maybe distribution. The other reason why you pitch is maybe for promotion that you just don't have, and you need their promotional arm to help strengthen this thing and get it out to more people than you're able to do yourself. And so when you're thinking about these things, it's like, what's the cheap version of this that I could do myself starting tomorrow? What is the middle version of this that I could do if I had a little bit of help from one of these production companies or distribution companies? And what is the, if I had, everything I needed to make this thing the best version of it possible, where would I spend the money? You know, when you go to pitch an investor, right, on anything, the first question they ask you is, if I write you a check tomorrow, where's the money going? Where are you going to spend it? And so to answer your question, yeah, you should be thinking a lot about where you would spend money if given it.
Okay.
Because they want to know.
Okay. There you go. Well, you couldn't say it more flat than more plain than that. So now let me ask you this. Just want to dig in a little deeper on one of the things that you said, because I too have a TV background, and we would cut corners wherever we could because we've been afforded that because we're visual. So there would be times where I would tell folks, they would say, "Oh, I want this camera, I want this specific camera," and I'm like, "Listen, the best cameraman in the world can take the cheapest, most disgusting camera ever and give you a masterpiece, but can you really cut corners that way in podcasting? Because if the sound is not there, you're done." If the sound is anyway just not, the people are not, you can have snow up for about maybe 5 seconds and then come back and the folks will still be sitting there. If you do not have good quality within the first 60 seconds, those folks are gone, and how are you going to get them back?
I think Connor and Christina are perfect examples. Before that we were working together, they created something on their own with zero budget. And I mean, you guys should talk about that. How did you do it? How did you think about it?
Yeah, I mean,
because it sounds good.
Well, we'll just talk about
ladies
the
first.
Budget and money. Connor and I made. Thank you. Connor and I made a podcast with no budget at all, completely for free. Okay. I would say don't underestimate the power of your friends and any connections that you might have. Connor and I, we were working full-time jobs, and after we were just writing a podcast like into the hours of the night. And we met up with our friend who studied sound design and music. So he had a little bit of a background in mixing, but he'd never done a podcast before. Mm-hmm. So we just got all of our friends who had cool voices and could act, and just recorded everybody in his closet. So you can really do a lot on a shoestring budget if you have friends behind you.
In the closet, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, look, there's no
up in the summer. Turn off the AC. It got real steamy.
Ooh. Well, there's no more quieter place in the house, is there?
No, especially in Brooklyn.
I mean, you would be astounded how many professional recorded podcasts are somebody just in their closet with a microphone like this, like fully giving their all. I mean, it's true. It's everywhere.
Listen, I believe it. I honestly and truly believe that. So, you know how in the film industry they always say like have that elevated pitch. You know, if you run into Spielberg in the elevator and you have X amount of time before he gets off to pitch that. Should you go in with that sort of pitch when you're ready to pitch, like that elevator pitch as we call it, or have a nice, thorough, presentation, explanations ready to go, or should you have both on hand just in case?
I mean, I think there's something that you can do just as an exercise for yourself and just figuring out how to present your idea, which is try to fine tune how you're presenting it to your friends, right? So like, what is the really quick way to immediately get them excited about it? And you can really just see it in somebody's face, whether or not they get excited just by the idea. Mm-hmm. And so what you can do is just keep doing it to everybody that you know, to eventually see the words that you put together that actually get them really excited about it. And I think, yes, that is like, I guess, the elevator pitch. And I don't think anybody ever is going to really be like, I need just the elevator pitch, or I need like the full, long pitch. But I think for you, it's just such a good way of figuring out, like, why is this idea exciting? Why would anybody want to buy it? And it's because, there's parts to an idea that always just resonate with people. So I think, the elevator pitch, I just always think of as the best version of figuring out if an idea is good or not. Yeah.
Okay, Christina, Will, you want to add anything to that?
I think that.
Will, you.
Christina, go.
Will,
There's a delay, so I can't hear you. You
Okay.
go,
I
please.
know.
It's all right. Will, go first.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Well, you can go.
Okay,
Right.
No, go ahead, Will. Go ahead.
I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, you know, in this kind of digital age that we're in right now, clearly, the pitch process is actually it's very interesting because you're not with someone in a room. And for me, I'm the type of person that I like to be in the room with people. I like to feel the energy in the room. I like to see the reactions, people. And so now all of a sudden we're doing these pitches on Zoom, and it's a whole different experience. And so now I'm seeing people and their different screens and everything, and I'm trying to gauge what their energy is, and that's difficult, and so I end up usually sometimes actually I end up just, you can pin someone on the screen so you can only see them, and I'll just pin the main person and watch them the whole time so I can gauge what their reaction is while we're talking. And if they're not reacting, then the pitch probably isn't going very well. But that's just a new thing. We've had to adopt it, and who knows when the next time we're going to be in a real room with people to give a pitch. And I guess to that, it's really just like like Connor said, have it prepped and ready to give the short version, but you don't know how much you have someone's attention on Zoom. So you got to make sure it's exciting and clear and concise. And if you're rambling, that might not go so well.
That's a
Yeah,
really
these
good
are
point.
things that you would already have to think about when you're pitching, but now you kind of have to do it 10 times better with like delivery. You need to try to be as engaging as you can, while thinking about matching the tone of the project is really important. So, like, for example, the MC deck that we just showed you guys, we wouldn't be cracking a bunch of jokes while presenting that. We would probably be sounding, really fascinated and really enthusiastic about the story. But if it was a comedy podcast, we would be a little bit more loose with it and crack a lot of jokes, as I am known to do. And yeah, it's also good to think about timing too. So with timing, cap it at 20 minutes, I think, is a perfect length for a pitch. You want to keep it moving fast so people don't get bored, especially now over Zoom. But also be mindful, kind of towing a line a little bit, be mindful to not overwhelm them with all the information. So if you have a really big idea, a really huge story, don't be afraid to kind of work in a little moment to ask if they have any questions halfway through. And be prepared for any questions that they may ask.
Okay. So is there anything else in terms of the pitching part that you want to discuss before we move on?
That's it.
That's it, okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so now you've done your pitch, and right now you have no clue what they're going to say, or they just say, we'll get back to what have you. What is the steps for post-pitching?
Yeah. Well, I think that the majority of pitches, at least that I've been in, I think you have a pretty good sense of how it went. Okay. In the room. Not always. That's not always the case. But, I think that you can kind of judge based on the types of questions they're asking, how interested they are in learning more. So remember what those questions are and how they were, asked to you. And I think that'll help you gauge kind of like which version of a follow-up you should do. So for me, I'm the king of not stalking, but hounding.
Okay.
that's my way, right? If I want
Yeah.
something, I will make sure that that person does not forget about the pitch that I just did until they say, no, like this isn't a good fit for us for whatever reason. I think that so often, we have a pitch and we think that the people that we just pitched to, or the person we just pitched to, are hear the pitch and then they're thinking about it all the time. The reality is they're not. They are hearing 50 other pitches maybe over the week, and so yours can easily get lost. And I think I am a firm believer in, of course, having a good pitch and being prepared for that pitch, but also being prepared to really make sure that you're getting a clear answer on how that went, and what you could have done better. One of the things that we really practice as a team is, if someone passes on a project of ours or passes on a proposal that we put in front of a company or a person or whatever, we say to them, hey, we'd love to set aside some time, even just 5 minutes if you can spare it, to just go through what we could have done better, because we're always working to improve our pitch and to improve ourselves as individuals in that type of scenario. And I think some of the feedback we've gotten from that has been some of the most powerful and valuable feedback that we can get. And so I guess to shorten the answer, it's be ready to follow up. Of course, be respectful of people's time. I'm not saying email them or call them every day after the thing. No, give them some time to kind of digest it, and then say, hey, I just wanted to circle back, wanted to see if you had any interest in pursuing this conversation further. And that's just, a nice way of doing it. And if you don't hear back from them, wait another week and go back to them again. Say, hey, I know you're busy. I totally get it. And, would love to hear your feedback on the pitch, to refresh your memory. Here's the pitch attached again, and really just try to stay in front of these people. They have a lot going on. They're very busy. And so you want to be respectful of that. But at the same time, it's important. You put a lot of work into it. You want to try to get an answer from them. And if they pass, if you can get feedback on why they passed, some of that feedback is really good for when you're going into your next pitch.
Sounds like the same way you would go about it if you were really trying to get a job.
Yeah, in a way, it's a job interview.
Okay, so same thing, send the follow-up email, and if you don't hear anything back, a simple, okay, a request of tips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or we send Christina over, and Christina knocks on their front door and says, we want answers and we want them now.
Yeah.
Have you had, well, Christina, I'm assuming you've had experience in that area. What is usually the feedback that one would receive sometimes?
Some feedback that we get, it really depends on the platform. I think different platforms have these mandates, so different things that they're looking to put on their slates. So some people might be looking for a narrative sci-fi horror podcast, something very niche, or somebody might not be looking for the top podcast that you pitched.
Okay.
So yeah, it can really depend on the platform, and sometimes they might have follow-up questions. Can you be a little bit more specific about this part, or we are wondering if you went with this direction in it, how different the idea could be.
Okay, but then, well, you mentioned before how, one should be passionate about it, about the topic, which I totally agree upon. But then there are some folks out there who really aren't necessarily interested in the content aspect of it, or as they are the production aspect of it. So does that change? Like that, I'm sure that's a game changer when it comes to pitching.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify, you're saying that when you pitch something and it's not, they're not saying no to the content,
No, what they're saying is
or they're
that,
not saying no to the
like,
production?
well, for instance, Christina just said, like, what if they, like, you pitch something, but it's like, well, you know what, we're not really looking for that. We're looking for more of, like you said, maybe a horror or something like that. We're like, well, you know what, that's not a
Right.
problem. Like, I can embark on that. Like, it's not so much the content that you're focusing on as that you enjoy doing the production.
Right. Yeah, listen, I think depending on what your pitch is and how developed it is and how tied to it you are, there's always room to, negotiate or to kind of change the way that your podcast could be. And, I think that I've always been taught to, if you're still passionate about it and trying to fit into what the person you pitch to's mandate is, or what what they're really trying to do with their business at that moment, then go for it, and maybe make some revisions to what your pitch is, and really try to make it work for that company. But if you feel like the feedback that you were given on the pitch is that they want to do a horror sci-fi, and what you pitched them was, a drama, musical. These are two very different things, and so if for whatever reason they're saying, hey, that's just not the type of thing we're looking for, I think there's also the version where you just say, look, appreciate you hearing our pitch. We appreciate your time. Maybe this project for you doesn't work at this time, or doesn't fit into, your mandate for the year, or what you're looking to do. But maybe, we'll come back to you with the next one, and maybe it will be more in line with what you are trying to do. Oh. And I think that's also good advice on that, which is when someone does say, hey, this isn't a good fit for us at this time, I think it's important to also say, okay, yeah, we get it. Thank you for that. Thank you for, for the feedback, and we'll come back, and we hope to pitch you again on something else, to really keep that relationship open, and to not say, what do you mean you don't like it? Okay. Why not? Let's,
all right.
I think that's important to know.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to thank you guys both, all three of you, for taking the time to join us. We are actually out of time right now, but thank you so much for joining us. I hope you folks at home were able to take away some valuable information. If you're interested, we are offering a podcast intensive course for 2021. It will be remote, but if you're interested, you can go on to bricartsmedia.org website to apply. Right now, applications are open and will be to the beginning of January. Also, please tune in to our documentary screening that will also take place on our channels December 17th. Okay, that'll start at 7 p.m. Thank you guys for being here again. I truly appreciate it, and look forward to seeing. I look forward to possibly seeing. First of all, I'm going to be looking for that podcast that you guys showed today.
Good.
For that to
it's coming.
All right. Well, you guys take care. Please stay safe, stay healthy, okay, and enjoy the holidays. And I hope you guys have a beautiful 2021.
You as well. Thank you
so
so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
All right, take care.
Thanks for tuning in, folks, for this edition for Media Talks. Have a good night. Stay safe. Stay healthy.